Hello, and thank you for tuning into our channel once again. My name is Dennis Morris, and I'm the minister for the Church of Christ in Jefferson, Texas. We're just glad to have you in our study of the Gospel of John, and we're in John chapter 7. We might recall how that Jesus was in Galilee. He had not been going to Judah because the Jews were seeking to kill him, according to John chapter 7 and verse 1. But now the Feast of Tabernacles is at hand. And his brothers then tell him, why don't you go to Judea and do the miracles that you do so that people will believe in you? And what's interesting is they're telling him what to do, even though they themselves do not believe that he is the Son of God. They say, well, a man doesn't do anything in secret. He wants it to be done in the open where people will see it, and then they'll follow you. And Jesus, of course, wasn't going to have it. He wasn't going to listen to what they had to say because he knew the hearts of men. He knew of their unbelief. He also knew of the attitudes of the Jews, because when his brothers went on down to the feast, you'll find that Jesus delayed his coming. But the Jews were asking, where's Jesus? Where's Jesus? And not all of them had the proper motivation in mind when they were asking that question. You might recall how that there were some who were following Jesus for the wrong reason. And we talked about that there in chapter 6. Some were motivated by food, and that's what they wanted. And Jesus, of course, was the one who would provide the spiritual food that was necessary for them to believe and to live a life for him. Just as he talked about that spiritual water unto the Samaritan woman back in John chapter 4. And so Jesus, of course, had his own plans. He did not listen to his brothers because they didn't believe in him. Now, as we stated, they did believe in him after his resurrection, which was proof perfect of the fact that he is the Son of God. But Jesus and what he said and Jesus and what he did should have been enough proof for them, as well as everyone else, that he's the Son of God. And because of their unbelief and because of them saying, this is what you need to do for people to believe in you, Jesus did not do as they said. Well, as we go on, we find that his brethren, they went on up to the feast. There in chapter 7 and in verse 10, we find it says, but when his brethren were gone up, now remember, brethren here is having reference unto his brothers, he went also up unto the feast, not openly, but it was in secret. And so he did not go with his brethren. He waited. He went, but he went in secret. He didn't tell anybody where he was. And so once again, there was a reason why Jesus was doing this. He was not a coward. He was not afraid. It was just that his time had not come as of yet. Well, in verse 11 it says, then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, where is he? So they're looking for Jesus. As I said, some were looking for Jesus for the right reason. Others were looking for Jesus for the wrong reason. And we find in verse 12, it says, and there was much murmuring among the people concerning him, for some said, he is a good man, and others said, nay, but he deceiveth the people. And so here you have various opinions that people had of Jesus. Anytime someone speaks against someone else, especially when they know the person has not done anything wrong, and Jesus never did anything wrong, there's reasons behind them speaking against someone. And we find that some were envious of Jesus, some were ignorant, and because of their willful ignorance, they were not willing to accept him as the Christ. But notice many individuals said he's a good man. Now, why would they say that? Why would they say that Jesus was a good man? Well, based upon what he taught, based upon what he did, he was going about doing that which was good. But it wasn't just that Jesus was a good man. He's the Son of God, 100% God, 100% man. And so here you have the Jews and the various opinions that they have of the Christ. Some saying he's a good man, the others saying, no, he's a deceiver. And as a result of saying he's a deceiver, you're not supposed to listen to him. You're not supposed to follow him. Well, pray tell, who was it then that you were supposed to follow? Was it the religious leaders of the day? The Jewish leaders who hated Jesus, who envied Jesus, who now has sought to kill him? Well, that kind of attitude, of course, is one that proves that we were not supposed to follow those that exhibit those kinds of attitudes, because that would be wrong for them to have that, and it would be wrong for us to follow them. And so they're murmuring, going back into. In verse 13, howbeit no man spake openly of him for fear of the Jews. Now, you're going to see that as time goes on, that people are afraid of the Jews. And a lot of times here in connection with the Jews, we're not talking about the common people. Matter of fact, it was the common people who were afraid. But as time goes on, you'll find not only were the common people afraid, there were some priests who believed in Jesus but wouldn't confess him. There were some even of the Sanhedrin who believed in Jesus, and yet we find that their willingness to let others know was not evident until later on. And so here we have them discussing Jesus and murmuring back into saying he's a good man, no, he's a deceiver, and yet we find that they were not going to say anything to, and I believe here in this particular context it would be the Pharisees, but we could also say the Sanhedrin, because they were the leaders of the day. Now in verse 14, it says, Now about the midst of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and he taught. Well, as we said, he didn't go with his brothers. He went later. He went in secret, not publicizing the fact that he was there. But now he goes into the temple. And we recall that Jesus understood that the temple was his Father's house, and that he must be about his Father's business. And that's what Jesus is doing here. And so as Jesus is teaching in the temple, notice in verse 15 that the Jews marveled, saying, How knoweth this man letters, having never learned? Now what does that mean? Well, Jesus didn't go to the finest schools of his day, as some individuals were able to do. I mean, remember Saul, later on the Apostle Paul, that he was taught at the feet of Gamaliel? Well, Jesus was not taught as far as the higher education was concerned. Now, you know, the Jewish boys were taught to read and so forth. And so now Jesus, of course, is up there talking to them, and they're asking questions. Well, how does he know these things? You know, we know Jesus. We know from whence he came. Did they really? He came from heaven. They just thought he came from Capernaum. And so here you have them talking and wondering, how does he know the things that he knows? Well, the reason being is because he's the Son of God. Well, we appreciate you tuning in today. We're going to stop there, because when they start asking Jesus these questions, then of course he gives them answer as to how it is he knows the things that he knows. And that's also a very interesting study. Well, we hope and pray that everything will go well for you today. And Lord willing, we'll be back with you Monday as we continue in our study.